All right, now what is the question on Browns fans' minds? We talked about the Browns having the second overall pick, and we're going to talk about every single prospect the Browns could potentially take in this draft class. I'm going to go to Mobile for the Senior Bowl again this year. Super excited about that because, I mean, this is going to be the most important Browns draft that they've had in quite a while. We have a lot to talk about with them firing Ken Dorsey, opening up the offensive coordinator position, and we'll start there, right, with what's next. What's next? Are there any more coaches that could possibly get fired? Is there anybody who could be gone that has not been let go yet? I look at two names, Deuce Staley and Bubba Ventrone. I don't think Bubba Ventrone is going to get fired because that would fall under the category of a big change, and that would also mean that the Browns would have to look for two coordinators this offseason instead of just one. I think they're just going to stick with Bubba Ventrone. I think it's going to be purely because of convenience. I don't think it's because of performance. I don't think it's because he's doing a great job. I just think it's just convenient to not have to have that much turnover in your head coaching staff, especially when you're hiring another offensive coordinator for the second year in a row. So it's an unfortunate situation the Browns find themselves, but fortunate for Bubba Ventrone. I think this means he stays. Kevin said they're not going to make any more major changes. I would have to assume that a major change would be your your special teams coordinator. Now, Deuce Staley, the running backs coach, that could fall over a smaller change or fall under the guise of a smaller change. Here's the problem that Deuce Staley has. They fired Andy Dickerson. They fired Ken Dorsey. It seems like one of the main reasons those guys got fired was that the Browns couldn't run the ball well. And if you listen to the Browns offensive linemen, they feel like one of the chief reasons that was the case is because they weren't doing the same things on the same level at the same clip that they were doing them in the past. They feel like they switched to an offense to make somebody else comfortable, but they did it at the risk of making everybody else uncomfortable. And then the dude that it was supposed to make comfortable, well, then he sucked. And if you look at it through that lens, right? Like, let's just imagine it through that lens, where if you're the Browns, you're the Browns offensive line, and you're the Browns running back, and you've been on this team when they've done something successful to the highest degree you can in the league, right? The Browns offensive line at one point was the best offensive line in football without competition. 2020, 2021. Browns run game. It's one of the best run games in football without competition. And then you fast forward, you change some of the core things. The reason that is because they're telling you, hey, they want to get this guy at quarterback more comfortable. And maybe at the time you understand it because maybe you believed in Deshaun Watson at that time. But I don't know how long it took for them not to believe in him. From what it looks like from week one they didn't believe in him, right? Because like you could just see it when you watch the Browns in the first 7 weeks of the season. There was a lack of belief in effort in the offense. And it makes me wonder how much that played a role in the frustration of this offensive line. Because they're getting dragged through the mud, but they're doing stuff in different ways that they've done it. And they're too old for all of that. And that got Ken Dorsey fired. We don't think that Deshaun Watson has a serious role in the Cleveland Browns' future. I know that people are desperately trying to make us feel like there is a strong chance that Deshaun Watson can come back and play well for the Cleveland Browns, but look at it this way. In that ESPN article, they interviewed somebody who was a part of Deshaun Watson's team. And they asked that person, what does Deshaun need? And they said Deshaun needs to have more of the offense built around him, that this whole thing needs to go through Deshaun Watson. Now, when they interviewed Kevin Stefanski at the end of the year, they asked Kevin what he wants to do. He said he wants to build a system. Not a system around the quarterback, but a system around what he knows. So it feels like they're starting the process of distancing themselves from the Deshaun Watson project. They are talking about moving the offense back to what it was before Deshaun Watson got here. They're talking about firing the offense. Not even talking about it. They fired the offensive coordinator who was brought here to help Deshaun Watson. It seems like they are moving away from that. And if you look at it on paper, last year, Deshaun Watson got the offense that he wanted. He got the spring and the summer to get all the rust off of him as possible. And then he came into the season and he looked horrific. And then he tore his Achilles. Now, if you look at this on paper, Deshaun Watson, if you decide to play him, will be coming off an Achilles injury and will be fresh off that Achilles injury. We're talking about best case scenario, he gets cleared to play in July. It's very unlikely he will see preseason action. And maybe he could do 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s by August. Who knows if he could do the full go. Remember all the weirdness that we had to deal with last year when it comes to Watson being able to throw. He'll throw a couple bad passes. They shut down practice, right? We dealt with all that weird stuff last year, and that was before he was coming back from an Achilles. Now, say what you want about modern medicine and how we've gotten better with surgery to fix these muscle tendon issues. Achilles injuries are Achilles injuries, especially when your age is closer to 30. Aaron Rodgers, Achilles injury, doesn't look the same. Kirk Cousins, Achilles injury, doesn't look the same. Or at least that first year removed from that Achilles injury, they don't look the same. Deshaun Watson, 1 year removed from an Achilles injury. He's probably not going to look great athletically. He's probably not going to be able to have the comfort and plan. I mean, we saw Nick Chubb, who's as great as the athletes we've seen in the Cleveland Browns uniform in modern history, and he had some struggles coming back from ACL tears. So I can't expect Deshaun Watson to be a tremendous athlete coming back. He's going to be in an offense that he's known to have struggled in. And he was horrific last year. Partially, it looked like that shoulder injury had something to do with it, right? The zip in which he was throwing the football did not look the same as it did in years prior. And you have to ask yourself, are they really trying to let this dude play? We'll see. Some people are adamant that Deshaun Watson's going to get a real chance to play. I don't know if that's the case because, if they sign Kirk Cousins, he's not getting a real chance to play because that means Kirk Cousins will be there in the spring. That means Kirk Cousins will be there at the beginning of camp. Kirk Cousins will take the bulk of the number one reps in July and in August. And then Deshaun Watson going to mosey on in there trying to compete. That's a horrible situation to try to win a job. He's not going to win a job like that. Maybe if the dude he's competing against is a Jacoby Brissett, but I'm not confident he would beat Jacoby Brissett in an outright competition if it's fair, especially in those circumstances. Not saying it's impossible, but depending on what the Browns do in free agency at the quarterback position, there's no way it's going to be a competition if they sign certain guys. If they go after Kirk Cousins, it's not a competition. Kirk Cousins is going to be your starting quarterback week one. The question is will they have Deshaun Watson on the roster as the backup or something like that, right? That would be the question. But if it's somebody like Jacoby Brissett, okay, then maybe it's a competition. If it's somebody like Justin Fields, maybe it's a competition. The only guy they bring in is Kyle Trask. Yeah, it's probably a competition, right? Or Malik Willis or some other unproven guy, Trey Lance, right? Then maybe it's a competition. But if they bring in what they've said in multiple reports they wanted to bring in, right? Every report says the Browns want to bring in a veteran quarterback. Now, what does veteran mean? Does veteran mean a former starter? Or does veteran mean a guy who's accumulated a lot of years? I don't know what the Browns are specifically looking for when it comes to a veteran quarterback. Could be one thing, could be the other. But if they're bringing in an established starter like Kirk Cousins, then yeah, man. Even if it was Joe Flacco, it would be a problem for Deshaun Watson. Because Joe already got the people on his side. And then Joe would be here in the spring. Joe would be here at the beginning of camp. And it would be a similar situation to Kirk Cousins. So, like, this idea of there being a competition, like, I'm just smelling the tea leaves on it, and I'm calling BS either way. Either this is going to be a sham competition for Deshaun Watson to take the job and for them to justify Deshaun Watson starting again, or this is going to be a polite way of telling Deshaun Watson that they're done with him, right? I lean towards it being that because every move they have made seems like they want to move in a different direction at quarterback. Ultimately, the draft and free agency will tell us everything we need to know, but more than likely, it feels like that's what's going on. But that's something to watch. Another thing to watch is the Tommy Rees stuff. I don't know what's going on with him. I'm not telling you that I know why Tommy Rees is so coveted. I have no idea what Tommy Rees does in that building. But whatever he does, or whoever he's worked with in the past, maybe it's Nick Saban. Because Nick Saban's the only one who I've seen in his coaching tree that feels like they have the cachet to have Tommy Rees's name be elevated to this level. But somebody powerful is pushing Tommy Rees behind the scenes, right? Tommy Rees almost got the job at North Carolina if Bill Belichick didn't get it. Tommy Rees has been rumored for multiple offensive coordinator jobs. It's already been put out there that Mike Vrabel is going to be looking for Tommy Rees. If he gets a job, it's possible that Mike Vrabel gets that job in New England. I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen. I know a lot of people are assuming that's going to happen. And it makes sense. Mike Vrabel's a former Bill Belichick guy. And that would be perfect to add with what the New England Patriots have. I don't know if Vrabel coached for the Patriots. I know he played for the Patriots back in the day. And maybe that's what they're trying to go to. I don't know if they're trying to distance themselves away from the Belichick tree, or maybe they might want to go and get them an offensive-minded head coach. I think that might be something that they might want to look into because they have a young quarterback there in Drake May that they want to continue to develop. So maybe that's where they go. But Tommy Rees has been rumored for multiple different jobs. He looks like he's destined to get a promotion. I think it's possible that the Browns promote him to offensive coordinator. Somebody powerful really likes Tommy Rees. So where he goes is going to be interesting. The Browns promote him to offensive coordinator. He would have to choose that versus getting a job in whatever place that Mike Vrabel lands, or potentially taking a job at college or something like that. But Tommy Rees seems to be very sought after. I don't know why, and I'm not saying that as a negative thing. I'm not saying that Tommy Rees has done a bad job. I don't know what kind of job he's done. All I know, he's the tight ends coach, and I thought the tight ends played pretty well this year, all things considered. But even that's a hard barometer to judge a coach by, because sometimes you're coaching well, but they're just not playing too well, or maybe you're coaching poorly, but they're playing well despite you. But either way, keep an eye on Tommy Rees. That's a name that's going to go out. The Browns do have to think about what they want in a new offensive coordinator, and there's a lot to talk about there, right? My question for them this offseason is similar to the question they had when they had to fill this role last year. What is it that you're trying to do? Right? Are you trying to build an offense that can succeed with multiple different quarterbacks? Now, your ceiling on that offense is going to be limited. You're not going to be able to create a ton of explosives. But you might be able to live with quarterbacks that are available on the market. That, to me, is what I think they're trying to do. I think what Kevin is trying to do is he knows that his back's against the wall this year. They won 3 games. He can't do it again. He needs to go back to his bread and butter. I expect to see more 12 personnel. I expect to see them go twin tight end. I expect them to get back into their bread and butter. And this offensive coordinator hire is going to be what helps them get to it. Now, you could go back to Alex Van Pelt, but I think you have the same issues you have with Alex Van Pelt that you had in 2023. Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt failed to innovate this offense effectively. Now, Part of that was just around Deshaun Watson, but a good chunk of that was still like in the base Kevin Stefanski stuff. They still were a bit predictable. So if you want to innovate, I don't know if Alex Van Pelt, who will be available because they fired Gerard Mayo, is the best option to go with. I know it would make people feel more comfortable because the last time Alex Van Pelt was here, the Browns won 11 games, and you just heard a lot of your not former players, your players talk about how they were surprised that Alex Van Pelt got let go. And maybe that's the direction things go. But I do think the Browns should consider that it wasn't like they were 100% happy with Alex Van Pelt when they let him go. Like, there's a way to get back to the West Coast fundamentals, get back to what you're used to, but maybe hire somebody who can add more to it than what Alex Van Pelt and Kevin Stefanski were able to add to it. Maybe they're not going to be as big as a name. Maybe they're a younger person in the business, but I would hope that that's something they look for. Definitely want it to be the West Coast base. Definitely want to have somebody who is okay with Kevin being in charge and calling the plays, because that's worked before. And again, Kevin's back's against the wall this year. He's going to want to call the plays. He's going to want to have his thumbs all over this offense. He's going to want to do what he did when he won Coach of the Year those 2 times. And when he won Coach of the Year, he was calling the plays. He had his thumbs all over this offense. So he's going to want that kind of control over this. So I think that's the kind of coordinator candidate that they look for. This offseason is going to be incredibly important to Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, because they have to build a team that's going to be competitive and win games next year. Because if they don't, if people leave next season feeling as hopeless as they do right now, if people at no point during the season feel hope about the Browns' future and feel like it's going in the right direction, these dudes are going to get fired. So they have to make sure they're doing everything they can to put themselves and this team in a position to be successful. That means to me, not just sitting there hoping and praying that Deshaun Watson is good again, right? That means being a little bit more proactive about the quarterback situation. That also means, to me, you're starting a veteran quarterback and you're rolling with the veteran quarterback. Now, one thing to watch is like Sam Darnold's price, because he just had a stinker of a game in front of the entire country on Sunday Night Football. And if he drops a bad playoff game next week, all that stuff we heard about Sam Darnold getting $46 million might as well be like written on toilet paper, because it doesn't matter anymore. He ain't getting $46 million. He's not getting extended by the Vikings. He's going to hit free agency and get like a $10 million deal that can get up to $20 million in incentives for like 1 year. Like if he has another bad game like that, because that game was horrific for Sam Darnold. And anybody who's going to be paying like $40 million for Sam Darnold, they got to be confident that seeing ghost Sam Darnold don't exist no more. And that looked like seeing ghost Sam Darnold. Not fully, but it was close. So we'll see what happens with him too. But there's a lot that the Browns have to figure out this offseason. What are they going to do for quarterback right now? What is the long-term plan at quarterback? If you don't think there's a solution in this year's draft, don't force it. But you got to make sure you get to next year's draft. So what's your plan to get to next year's draft if you're the Cleveland Browns? It's a big question, because it's not going to be easy to find an answer. And I think the Browns' answer to them is going to be, well, we have had success without a franchise quarterback before, and we got that success by leaning on what Kevin likes to do. So we're going to lean more on what Kevin likes to do. Last year was the prove-it year for Deshaun Watson. They put everything in the offseason into running the Deshaun Watson offense and seeing if he's going to sink or swim in that setting. And Deshaun Watson sunk all the way to the bottom of Lake Erie in last year's Browns offense. Okay, so you now know the answer there. Deshaun Watson's not the guy. Even though you're paying him like the guy, not the guy. So let's look at this year. Who's getting the prove-it apparatus around them? It's Kevin Stefanski. They're going to put everything around Kevin Stefanski this offseason to have him be able to show us how good of a coach he is, right? He won his 2 Coach of the Year awards, running the offense a certain type of way with a certain type of quarterback. Okay, well, we're going to try to give you a certain type of, we might give you your favorite quarterback, Kirk Cousins. We're going to support this team defensively. We're going to get some good players in free agency in the draft, and we're going to see what you can do, coach. And if Kevin is who the Browns front office thinks Kevin is, which Andrew Berry once said he's Andy Reid, or at least compares favorably to Andy Reid, okay, he's going to have to prove it. This is going to be the year to prove it. Last year, it was the Deshaun Watson prove it year. We're now in the offseason. Deshaun did not prove it. We're seeing the team clearly distance themselves from Deshaun Watson. If it goes similarly for Kevin Stefanski in his prove it year, and Andrew Berry in his prove it year, because this is a prove it year for Andrew Berry too, you will see the Browns similarly distance themselves from Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. And if that happens, then all hell could break loose, right? I don't think Myles Garrett is going to request a trade this offseason. I would be surprised if that happened. But if you did go through a scenario where like you won 3 games in a row next year, everything's on the books, even if Myles signs an extension this offseason. So that's where you're at if you're the Cleveland Browns. So that's where I think they're at. This is a prove-it year for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, and they're going to put everything they can behind these two to give them a fair shake to be able to prove themselves. I don't think they're going to force the Browns. I don't think the ownership's going to force the Browns to be saddled by Deshaun Watson at the quarterback position, that they're going to be able to start somebody else if they want to. And they got to show you some hope that this thing could get better, that this thing's in the right hands this season. So let's see if they show us that. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.